We are so pleased to have Stacey Snyder taking the lead in this because she does the coolest things that I know of. Anybody I know, she does more exciting things. She's a teacher of the gifted in Waterloo, Iowa. And I think you're really going to love having the opportunity to hear from her today. And if you put a message or a question in the chat, I'll be monitoring the chat. I think she'll have a few minutes at the end, but like I say, she'll have to run out at 5:50. So Stacey, try sharing.
Hello all. Give this a try.
Beautiful.
It's sharing?
Well, it is, but what we're seeing is
My desktop
connection. Yeah, you have to pick the right window to share. Yes.
Uh-oh. Closed it. Technology is not always my friend. Give me a moment. I'll get there, folks.
We all totally get that one. That's why so many of us turn to our students to handle the technology for us. The Belin-Blank Center used to offer a 1 semester hour workshop focused on technology, and we just realized we can let that course go because you guys get everything you need from your schools. But 20, 25 years ago, it was so different. This is looking great, Stacey. You've got it.
I don't see it though. Oh, there it goes.
And Stacey is the 2023 Conservation Teacher of the Year in Iowa, which I think is also just an amazing thing. So I'll be quiet now.
No, you're fine. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. And when Lori and I talk, we kind of talk like place-based and community enrichment ideas for students was the theme. And so I kind of have 3 big pictures I wanted to share with you, and one will probably take the most time. But I wanted to share a little bit about, okay, why is it not going? There we go. Where I operate from. And that's this quote from Rachel Carson. And hopefully you're familiar with her, but if not, if a child is to keep alive his inborn sense of wonder, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. And she wrote that in the 1960s. So I take it to mean the him as her too. And, you know, in our day and age, all children, but I want to be that adult for kids. And so that's where a lot of my teaching comes from. And my why, I hope it's for all of us, is the kids. But if you'll notice the question mark on there, it's one of the topics we're going to talk about today. And that is the larva and pupa stage, or the caterpillar and the chrysalis of the monarch butterfly. And so my why, when I choose to do things, is this. Is there engagement of my students? And is it authentic? Is there some authenticity involved? And so that brought me to citizen science. And so a program from which I've worked with since prior to 1994, I started tagging in 1990, and I'll explain that here in a second, is Monarch Watch. And if you're not familiar with it, we're going to talk about it a little bit. The link is monarchwatch.org. I don't know that I'll spend a whole lot of time at the website, but I want to tell you a story. And it started for me in 1990. Back then, I had graduated in 1986 with a biology degree. And in Iowa, there weren't science teaching jobs. It was like, there was too many. It's so total opposite of what's going on here in our state now. And maybe that's true of your state too, but I couldn't find a teaching job in science, and I wanted to teach science. And my sister, who was a year younger, had just graduated from Iowa State University, and she took a job as a naturalist with the County Conservation Board. And in Iowa, we have 99 counties, and currently each county has a conservation board. And like Lori said, I'm on that board. We manage an area that has endangered rattlesnakes, and we've got an issue going on there. That's why I got to kind of sneak out a little early tonight. That just kind of came up. But when you're managing endangered species, you kind of jump, and I guess I'm kind of partial to those rattlesnakes. So, but anyway, I'm also partial to these guys, the monarch butterflies. And in the last few years, they're also being considered as a potential endangered species. But anyway, back to my story. I didn't have a teaching job, so my sister said, why don't you be a naturalist? They do what science teaching is. So I did. I took a job with Pocahontas County in Iowa, being their first county naturalist. And again, I wanted to make sure people came to our parks for a reason, and whether that be enjoyment or maybe interacting with that park. And for me to lead a program, I wanted people to interact with the park. And I heard about a guy, his name was Fred Urquhart, or Urquhart. It's Urquhart. And he is no longer is alive, but in 1990, he was looking for more research associates. And so I jumped in. I'm one of those early adopters, pioneers. Let's get things started and see what it's like. So I jumped into the program, which he had been doing for several years, but he was working to expand it. And he was asking the question, where do monarch butterflies go? And this was in the 1950s that he started asking that question. And so he was trying to figure out, they knew that they moved somewhere, and somebody somewhere knew that they came there. But in the 1950s, we didn't have cell phones. We didn't have communication by satellite. I'm not even sure how much our newspapers reported of what's going on in other countries in that sense. So there was a question in his mind, and some of the questions I ask in my classroom, I have a science background, but I also love geography. And so I have my kids that I wonder, I notice, why is it there? Why should we care? And should we do anything about it? And so I use this as an example with the kids. He cared. He wanted to know about these monarchs, and what should I do about it? So he started tagging, and I don't know if in the middle of the picture and then that top left one, you can see that little tab. So back when I started tagging monarchs, we had to remove some of the scales of the butterfly, fold that tag over, and place it on there. And you might imagine doing that with young kids. We lost a few butterflies because you crinkled their wings, and it was pretty sad. But on the right-hand side of the picture, that's a monarch I tagged just Saturday night. So that's a current tag. AHHW929 is on its way to Mexico. I didn't happen to tag that one with my students, but my friends' kids. They had probably 300, 400 monarchs in their yard, so I was out tagging with them. But anyway, Fred Urquhart did discover in the 1970s in Mexico the reserves where the monarchs go. But he was still looking for people. So in 1990, I started tagging with him. He retired, I believe it was 93 or 94. And so that's when I started Monarch Watch. And you can see that on their tag there. And here's some of my students tagging a monarch, sending it on their merry way. So over the years, I've tagged a various amount of monarchs, but what I have liked to do as an extension activity is measurements. And this can be a little challenging. If you notice on the picture on the left, it's a very small scale mass taker, but we use remember the overhead sheet protectors that you wrote on? You might not if you're a younger teacher, but you fold those over and tape them together on two sides, and then slide the monarch in there to keep it from flapping around and keep it steady so you can take its mass And then you can also see on the right picture, right-hand side, there's two of my students measuring, there's two lengths that the researchers want. And on the Monarch Watch website, you can find the instructions to do this. And I can show you where that is if you're curious about doing it. It's pretty tedious work, but my students end up loving it. And we've been reporting that data to Monarch Watch. I'm not exactly sure how they use it, but I know it's a good skill for students to work with precise measurements because you got to measure in millimeters and the mass in grams. I have been teaching the last 9 years, 4th and 5th grade, this project. However, this year I'm also teaching through 7th grade. So I've got 6th and 7th graders doing this as well. And all those ages, I have discovered that very few of them are very accurate in measuring. So I have to teach that skill of, how do we get to a millimeter? How do we know it's 3.4 and not just plain 3? So anyway, that's a skill that I've enjoyed teaching. So those were the adult butterflies that I've done since 1990. But in the last probably decade, maybe 12 years now, I've also been working with the larva, which is a little bit more challenging. However, typically we are able to raise more inside than, according to statistics, they say maybe 2 out of every 2,000 eggs an adult lays becomes a monarch butterfly. Predators, weather, temperature, other factors get in the way. So I have my students raise them from the egg stage, or if we can't find enough eggs, although Iowa State University and Ames has been the last 4 years helping me and my classmates and other students around the state with getting eggs to begin the process. So in about a month, we go through the whole process. We had our first chrysalis form today, but I also have some slow starters coming. I've got a few of them in front of me. If we have time, I'll show you the process by which we're raising them. But you can see here, they're in a petri dish with the milkweed. Got to have a milkweed source because that's all they eat. And by the time they're done, they're eating lots and lots. But the 2 jobs that kids have to do is observe, and you can see this young man doing that, and clean the frass. Feed, observe, clean the frass. So I guess it's 3. And frass is the entomologist term for insect, scat, or poop. And you can see some in that container there. We hadn't cleaned that one up yet. Oops. So this is the Monarch Larva Monitoring Project. It's based out of the University of Minnesota. And I forgot to mention that Monarch Watch is out of the University of Kansas. I've been trained as a monarch larva monitor. The biggest challenge for that is it takes a huge commitment in the summertime. So I've never really done that with students, but if you're interested in it, it's a really worthwhile project. And again, the whole idea with citizen science is collecting data, authentic information that scientists can use, extending the reach of a scientist because they can't possibly gather all that data on their own. So engaging students in that authentic way has been important to me. I will just pop on that website for a second so you can just see what it looks like, maybe. Slow internet. But the whole idea is for people to, there we go, get trained. If you really like the training, to sign yourself up, you go out and monitor. I think it's weekly in an area, and then you submit your data. And I guess I never showed you the Monarch Watch where you submit the data, but we can go back to that here in a second. But another way you can get involved with citizen science for students is through Journey North. Journey North is also a good information piece, even if you don't submit your own data, to read other people's data. And with Journey North, it could kind of be a misnomer because that's guiding the migration north, but there's also the southern. So I just want to pop on this page and show you some of the projects that they do, because it's not just monarchs. I follow the monarch, but there's hummingbird. There's in the spring, there's what are the things that you're seeing first in the spring? What are the things you're seeing currently? So like in the fall, they're doing bald eagles, hummingbirds, milkweed, monarchs, robins. What are the early signs of fall? When are you planting your tulips? So you can see all sorts of things. And if you come down to the spring again, the hummingbirds, the earthworms, the barn swallows, the milkweed, the loons. So depending on what part of the country you live in, any of these might be perfect. Ice out, maybe you want to see where is ice out happening. And so what they do is for people who want to can get an account and map your data by sending it to them. And then I go here weekly and show the kids. So, whoops, I'm sorry. Go back to the map. I go in and I show them monarch observations where they're citing the adults. So you can see the graph over here. Those are adult sightings, but I like to really hone in and, okay, you guys, what's the difference between seeing one and knowing that they're roosting and they're migrating south? So most current date, September 13 through 26 is this color of green, which I'm having a tough time resolving for sure. But this weekend we had roosted and I reported that's up here. And now look how far they've moved. I know I have friends in the Ames area that were tagging several this last night. So you can see the wave of migration happening through this map. Another way you can get involved and help with the monarchs is all on your own, but this is a group that I kind of follow. It's called Monarch Joint Venture, and they help by creating habitat. So monarchs need a place to live. Like I said, they are being considered for the endangered species. That the numbers have dwindled since they are a migrating species. They go all across North America. So we have to have spring spaces, summer spaces, and winter spaces for them. The winter spaces happen to be timeout. If you live west of the Rocky Mountains, this doesn't count because all those monarchs stay in California. But if you're east of the Rocky Mountains, they migrate to Mexico and the reserves in Mexico. The one that I'm most familiar with is El Rosario, because in the early years, that's where I would get reports back that our monarchs had made it. And they don't send, Monarch Watch doesn't send reports that or a certificate saying yours was found anymore, but you can go online and read the data. And I've checked the last 3 years and none of mine have been found in Mexico. I want to believe that they've gone there, but in a side note, in my early years of tagging monarchs between 1990 and say 2004, I would tag anywhere between 200 and 1,300 in a fall. In the last 5 or 6 years, even 7 years, I was lucky if I could get 50. I don't know if the migration shifted so much that I wasn't finding the roost sites or if they were that low. I mean, if you look at the overall population going into the reserves in Mexico, they are lower, but I don't know if it's a shift of where I live or what. But the other night, my friend who We last tagged at her place in 2013, so 10 years ago already, in large numbers. She called me back and we got more. So her children were 3 and 7 at the time. Now they helped me again the other night, 10 years later, and we were just fascinated. I mean, we were seeing hundreds. I would take a butterfly net up and swoop, and I'd get 17 to 18 in the net at a time. That's the old days. Nowadays, in the last 8 to 10 years, I was struggling to find them. But anyway, the habitat for the larva, if you're not familiar, they are milkweed specific. And in Iowa, we have, I think it's 10, maybe more species of milkweed. So I don't know where you live, what you have, but make sure you can, if you're creating habitat, that you plant that for the larva. The eggs are laid on monarch or milkweed, so you have to have it for that. The larva, they'll find anywhere high and perched and protected. And the adults, they're nectar lovers, so they'll find nectar in any plant. Monarch life cycle is about a month to go from egg to adult until the migrating generation. So those that are happening, at least here right now, they will live from while they're migrating through the winter till about next Marchish, and maybe make Texas, and they'll mate and die. And then Texas to maybe Kansas-ish is a whole nother generation. Kansas-ish to Iowa, Minnesota-ish is another generation. And some keep going further into Canada. Some stay here, like stay in Iowa. I usually see them for sure by Memorial Day. So that generation, June, I see another generation, July, August, and now the long-termers. And it blows my mind how they know where to come back, because it's that many great grand butterflies away. I don't know if I said the right amount of greats, but you're following my story, hopefully. So I could talk about monarchs forever. Hopefully you learned a few things, but I kind of want to switch gears for a little bit. And it might not be the clearest picture, but this was when they started, the Canadians, the Urquharts, discovered where the monarchs go. And they're so thick, as you can see in that National Geographic cover, that they're everywhere. You can barely see the vegetation. I've not had the privilege to go see this, but that's on my bucket list. And I'm hoping that I get there in the next few years to see the migrating monarchs in the wintertime. But as a child, and still today, I've had a fascination with the golden rectangle. National Geographic magazine, I've always looked at. I won't say I've read, because I don't read all of the articles, but I sure devour the photos. And so I got involved with National Geographic as a teacher, probably in the last decade. And I want to share some things with you that I think are important. Maybe. And one of those is Explorer Classroom. And Explorer Classroom is something that's open to anybody. And I encourage you to go to this link. And I know we're going to find a way to share those links with you, but I'll take you there for a second. But here is my students watching one of the Explorer live. We went to, quote unquote, the bottom of the earth, and we talked with an explorer in Antarctica. And Antarctica is near and dear to me because I had an opportunity to travel with National Geographic and Lindblad expeditions to Antarctica in 2019. But here's Explorer Classroom. So you can browse the events, and you can even go back and they record them. But if you want to be live so your students can hear them, like here's one tomorrow. If it works to study the world of reptiles tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern time, you go and you sign up. Or if it works better for you to do it at 2 o'clock Eastern, or if you want to learn from Louise Leakey about humanity's origins, she's going to be on next week, and you can kind of see how it goes. The petrified forest, but definitely I would encourage you. My students have loved listening to some explorer that is teaching them about some place somewhere. Last year, most recent one we did was we got on about a week after, I don't know if you heard about the discovery of the ship Endurance that sunk about 100 years ago with I can't even say it. My brain's too full. It's SH. But anyway, the Antarctic explorer that lost his ship but saved all his people. It's a fascinating story. And my students got to see pictures, live images of the vessels exploring the newly found sunken ship. Fascinating what we as humans do, right? Okay, so that's for your students. For you, there's 2 things. There's online courses, and I just mentioned to you that I got to go on a fascinating exploration as part of the program called the Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship. If you like to travel and you feel a passion about our Earth and you teach kids about the Earth, Lindblad Expeditions president said to us when we left, he said, you know what? The planet's in peril and we need you guys to teach about that. And so if you have that kind of passion, they're the people they want to send on these expeditions. So consider expeditions. But if you can't do that, do the online courses. I know Lori has talked about me being a National Geographic certified educator. Right now that program's on hold. So I would totally tell you to try it, but they're revamping it now. And partly because they've had new leadership and they're looking at how National Geographic over the years, just like at least in the United States, our citizenry has been very colonial, sexist, and racist. And so they're looking at how they can make the whole process better, looking at that big world picture. So I think it's going to be a great thing in the long run. I'm pictured here with a good friend of mine, Elaine, who helped get me started in some of the stuff that I've gotten to do with National Geographic. But I encourage you, these courses are free. They're online. They're somewhat paced, most of them, but there's some that are unpaced, but there's several topics. And currently I serve as the teaching assistant for the one on learning about plastic waste and pollution. So like, how do you develop explorer mindset with your students? That's been one of my favorite ones to take, even though I kind of already did that. It was great to get new ideas and meet new teachers doing the same thing. So I'm trying to find citizen science. That's what I've been talking to you about, is a great one. Trying to find the one I'm doing right here, collecting data to explore plastic. So enrollment's going on right now. The class starts September 27th, as you'll see all of them do, and it finishes November 15th, 25 hours a week. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me, because I think they're great classes. I've talked a lot and very fast, but oops, one more thing. Oh, sorry. I'm not the techie girl. We'll get there. Okay. I don't know if you knew this, but when I'm talking place-based, you gotta hopefully teach kids about this, because it's not all the time that you can see an eclipse. And there's going to be 2 coming up, one in October and one next April, that cross the path of the United States. And out there in this audience, I know some of you are probably in totality in one of these 2 times. And if you're lucky enough to be right down here in Texas, in the San Antonio roughish area, each of these totality bands is about 93 miles wide. And this one, the annular one in October, goes through, I forget the number, but 7 or 8 national parks. And so I'm lucky enough that October 13th is a day off of school. It's a Friday. We have conferences that week. I've bought my plane tickets. I'm going to Salt Lake City. And when I land, I'm going to check the weather forecast. My hope is to go to Nevada, to Great Basin National Park, because I've not been there. But if the weather's not looking good there, I'm also in line to either hit Bryce or Zion in Utah. None of them are that far from my landing in Salt Lake City. So my plan is to be in October 14th in line that morning to see the annular solar eclipse. And I've already got my personal day for April 8th. It happens to be a Monday. My cousin lives in Eastern Texas. I'd say probably around the O in total down there. I'm going to be at his place watching that one. And you can see these little images if you're not familiar, the difference between an annular or a total eclipse. The annular is like it's often called the ring of fire, and I'll show you a picture here in a second, but it's because in the plane of the earth, the moon, and the sun, the moon is further away from us, so they don't line up all perfectly. And so you get to see a little bit of the corona of the sun. And then on this one, the total, they line up exactly, but you see all the rays or the flares, the solar flares of the earth. But anyway, I think it's exciting. Again, teaching about place, kids to know, hey, this is happening in North America. I'm not positive on what year it is, but I think the next total solar eclipse is 3 or 4 years from now, and it's going to be in the Southern Hemisphere. However, it is Australian. It's a continent I haven't been to, so I have it on my radar. So the Ring of Fire, I didn't take this picture. I don't know where it came from, but I just think it's beautiful. I cannot wait to see it. I do have a link in this slideshow for you to go to find out a little bit more about all these eclipses. They talk about the time in Oregon all the way to Texas. So if you're in that, or if you can get to it, there's more information on this link. So let's see. Where am I? Sorry. Too many tabs.
I was going to say, you do have a few things open there that you have to choose
Hey,
from.
that's how I go. Well, there it is. My last slide basically says, if it goes, oops, did I close out? Tells you my basic information. There's me tagging a monarch. My email, my telephone number. I don't mind if you need to text or call or want to. If I spoke too fast, or there's something that you really were inspired to learn more about and I can be of help, I'm happy to do that. Otherwise, Lori, were there any questions?
No, Darcy here in Iowa City did say that she was sad when Journey North discontinued the mystery class. I don't guess anybody else picked that up.
I did it a couple years, but I don't know why they stopped.
Used to love that, and I loved it not knowing the answer. Learning alongside with the kids was just so great. And yeah, I think when COVID interrupted everything, that was one of the results of that. But it was fun while it lasted. But I'm really excited to explore the things you shared, Stacey. Thanks.
And Christy, were you talking about Journey North, that's the site that you loved?
There's a specific program that was called was it Mystery Classroom? You just said it, but I forgot. Mystery. And you would get information each week about different latitude, longitude, and try to plot where it is. Yeah, it was fascinating.
It looked
And
almost like
Stacey, like
somebody
you,
had it. Go ahead, Darcy.
oh, I was just gonna say, Stacey, like you discovered that the kids were not quite proficient in measuring to the nearest millimeter. Same thing with degrees of latitude and longitude. That was just a,
Oh,
in our
yeah, and
current state
degrees
of
is
priority
crazy.
standards, that kind of goes by the wayside, and it's unfortunate. The kids learn
Precision.
so much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
When
precision.
I
And
was
I,
teaching latitude and longitude, the kids were learning about estimation and math. I told them, you can't put those two things together. You can't just
yeah,
estimate
precision.
on the latitude and longitude.
I know when I teach latitude and longitude, I use GPS units and we do geocaching because it's an authentic hobby. And well, it's a hobby I appreciate. So that I agree with you. That's really tough. But Lori, to help clarify too, that Journey North has a whole bunch of other things I tried to show you.
Right, right.
Those are citizen science reports, but they also had sponsored the mystery classroom.
Well, and I think somebody may have cached it. If you look for mystery class, you might be able to, I mean, it would be the one that they did in 2020, but you might still be able to find one that's cached somewhere that you could, these students wouldn't have done it. So
You're right. You can still do those.
well, what does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Stacey before she goes off to stand up for the rights of the rattlesnakes in her area?
I speak for the Massasauga.
That's such an interesting name. And my question for her was that I felt like we were on pretty much, similar parallel. And one of the great things about moving from Oklahoma to Iowa up here, at least in Iowa City, is we just don't have any venomous snakes that we have to worry about. And we had quite a few different choices in Oklahoma. But yeah, but you're special, and you do have an endangered species right there in the Waterloo area. Lucky you guys.
It's north of Waterloo, because I live in Bremer County, which is about 25 miles from Waterloo. But yeah, it's one of 4 places in the state of Iowa that has the Massasauga. But there are 5 venomous species in Iowa. You just don't have any big city.
Yeah, just further south. So exactly. Well, if there are no other questions for Stacey, then oh yeah, Christy, you have one.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Okay, so Stacey, you said you were coming into Salt Lake to watch this eclipse. I'm in the area, and a couple of us on here are. Are we able to see it in Salt Lake?
My understanding, there's another map and I didn't show it. You might be 80%, but I'm flying into Salt Lake because that was the cheapest flight for me, and it's not far. That one slide, and Lori, you'll share the slides, right? Or somehow. So
yeah, if you'll send that to me,
yep,
then
I will.
Then Josh will get them posted for us.
Yep. That band, that 93-mile band, if you want to see it in totality or the full aspect, you're going to have to drive. But from Salt Lake, I don't know what Great Basin's, maybe 7 hours, 5 hours, maybe not even that far. And you would have Zion and Bryce. If you're further, like I know Crater Lake's in there. I can't remember all the national parks, and you don't have to go to a national park either, but it's just, I like to see national parks when I travel, if I'm going to go that far.
You might
Maybe I'll see you. What's that?
Yeah, you could look. You might throw the link on for any other any additional maps that'll show them like how much of the imaging they'll get. I mean,
yep, and that site that I have on that or the slides, it has more than you.
Okay. Yeah, but that would be great. I noticed that there was a little part of Oklahoma that was going to get greater or better visibility than we're going to get here in Iowa too. So, well, I'm going to share with you, we're going to change gears a little bit and go from science and Stacey's area. We're going to go to history, but it's not just history, because these primary sources can be used in a lot of other content areas as well. And so I am going to share my screen and show you just a little bit about the the Library of Congress, because it's another source. Let's see if I can get this moving here. Well, the other thing I was going to show you too, one of the sets of links that I'll share will be the links of things that you could consider starting the day with when you're meeting your kids. You could just have this up and let them work on it. Or you may have students who, even when you're differentiating in your classroom, they may still routinely get finished quicker. So these are some sites that have some engaging kinds of things on them. But I don't know if everybody has played set. Visual perception is I'm really much wordier, but I've gotten better with set, because a lot of days I'll remember to start with the daily set, and you can get that on this link. Does anybody see a match? Stacey, what do you see? Oh, I think you're muted. I always make sure I can find something before I put it up there. So, and if you've never played, you've got multiple components. You've got the shape, the different shapes. You've got whether they're filled or not filled or have stripes. And then you've got the different colors. And so
the one that I saw is in the second row, all three reds, the red oval striped,
I got excited by pressing it. Yes.
The two squiggles solid red, and the three diamonds open red.
So the thing that's the same is the red is the same in all of them, but the shape happens to be different in all three of them, and the fill happens to be different in all three of them. And so on the set game, it'll have like however many spaces there are for however many. And that's not one that I found. I found a couple of them earlier, but that's not one of them. But that's fun to do. And then here's another site, Fun with Puzzles. The person who designs this page is, I don't know if he's in India or from India, but the one thing that I have some notes on here that you'd be able to look at when we put the PowerPoint up. But if your kids are looking at some of these, they may wonder about some of the language, because of course it's more British. So when they're things that are math, it'll say maths and different things like that. But so they have all kinds of puzzles too. So if you have kids who especially love mathematics, they can do math kinds of things. If they're more the visual kinds of things, or wording, or just thinking outside the box, which is always great to have your students do. But this one is, this happened to be the easiest one. Can you find the Y in a group of X? And I could actually find that one. And then this one, can you solve this? So these are the kinds of things that that'll be included in some of the resources we send out. And I'm hoping some of you will send me the things that you really love too, because then we'll build this compendium, and we can, if Josh is willing, we can even update it on a somewhat regular basis. But these are good to kick the day off or to have on hand for kids. But the one that I was really interested in sharing with you is I was a history teacher and geography somewhat, but more history. And so I'm as passionate about things in history as Stacey is about things in science. I feel like it's so much more sedate though. I don't really, but I love looking at primary sources, and the Library of Congress is just an amazing place to find these resources. And so I've hot linked several things on here, but they have all of the sites that we were going to share with you just in this short time, and then that we will continue to share when we send things out. All of them do have information for teachers. So there's something there for you. They'll either be sometimes there are videos on some of these sites that'll take you through information. Like there's a video on here about how to use primary sources, but they also then have the materials for you to use with your students. So these are the sites that do kind of, I guess you'd say, double duty, providing information for you and providing information for your students. But you'll see on here that why they believe that primary sources are so important. And I can actually, now this was quite a while ago when I was actually teaching history, and it was, I had the students do a brief oral history to compare a particular topic with something that was in their text. And I remember a student coming back, and it was just the way she said it. She said, it was just like it said in the book. It was kind of like, as a student, she had never considered that the things that she was reading in the book were the things that had actually happened to people. And that I was a fairly new teacher, and her amazement convinced me that getting kids out, both doing oral history and learning from primary sources, can be really important. But the thing I love most is that almost everything that they have here at the Library of Congress, they have teacher guides. And the guides are pretty extensive, but they have a series of primary source sets. So these are the ones that they give you the teacher's guide, and then they give you all this material. So you don't even, you know that you're going to be teaching the Louisiana Purchase and Lewis and Clark expedition. So it's all right there for you. You go through it, see what's there, and you'll be able to use it. And they even give you hints as to the kinds of things that you can do with your students and ask your students. So I just put down some different choices. So classic history, and then inventions and innovations, which many of you are, I hope, if you don't know about invention programs, we have Invent Iowa, and then we link that with the National Invention Program. So there are invention programs for kids. So that's more, that's certainly not in the social studies, but yet you can use these materials from the Library of Congress to as part of what you're doing with inventions and innovations. And then civil rights, of course, is also history, but it's also more contemporary. Civil rights is a topic in and of itself, and different social studies use that. But one of the things that I really like about this is that they do include oral histories, and I love it. I went through the suggestions for teachers in their material, and they suggested that you have the kids listen to an oral history interview and then compare that oral history interview with a description in something like their text, and see, are they seeing things that are just the same? Are they seeing things that are different? And then other sets that they had include, they have one about natural disasters, one about transportation, women in science and technology, and there were a few more of these comprehensive sets. They also have separate digital collections, and you can, so I wanted to show you again sort of the scope of the kinds of things that you can find. These you have to take a little more time looking for what you particularly want if you're preparing for a unit, but these are things, if you have students who are working on some sort of a project, you can take, maybe they're looking at architecture. Well, they have a digital collection of imagery from art and architecture. And so the picture that I happened to put up, since it's baseball season right now, this is actually, they find this in their baseball sheet music collection, in their Celebrate Songs of America, and in the Performing Arts Encyclopedia. And so in addition to this picture, you can actually see the sheet music that goes with a number. I didn't even know this is the only one I happen to know. There are a number of baseball songs, and they have the sheet music there. But look at all these different topics. You know, they have more sports and rec, literature and poetry. So there's more there than I even realized until I was looking at this for you today. They have a separate link for researchers. And again, for kids who really love this type of thing, these are super kinds of resources that they have. You can go to the virtual programs and services and then to the web guides. And so they happen to have a Library of Congress poetry resources page. You can go to the teachers page to get ideas, but this was just an image of Langston Hughes. And you can see different lesson plans that they provide under this. historical voices and poetic visions. There was one I found really fascinating. They call it found poetry. And part of the lesson plan includes students writing their own found poetry. And the same thing, talking about Japanese American internment, the lesson plan, grades 5 through 8, has a poetry activity, including poetry for 2 voices format, where the students learn how to write a poem for 2 voices, and they and a partner, how they write it so that the readers know how to then read it. And so just, they have great ideas for teachers and amazing kinds of resources there. And then these are a couple of examples of their teacher's guide. One of the things that I started out using from the Library of Congress years ago were their source analyses pages. And so you'll see that they have, and this is the page itself, this picture is hot linked, and then this little picture is hot linked. So, but you can see all the different things that they help you understand how to help your students analyze primary sources in general. And that's kind of what this one is, that shows you the basics that go into you're observing, you're reflecting, and you're questioning. But one of the main points they make is this isn't linear. So the kids are welcome to go back and forth among they look linear on the page, but you don't have them observe first, reflect next, question. They can question at any point, or they could start by questioning and then observing. But you can analyze books and other texts, charts and graphs, manuscripts. They give you the sorts of questions that you can answer. Motion pictures. I thought analyzing newspapers could be really interesting because, of course, they have copies of historical newspapers, but kids could also begin to use that same approach to analyzing the newspapers that are around them today. Oral histories, photographs, political cartoons, that's always a great one. And then sheet music. And I had students analyze songs. And especially when you're looking at songs from different eras, it's pretty interesting. And then even the sound recordings. So they're a good, so this was an example of analyzing newspapers. So again, observing, reflecting, and questioning, but moving between the columns, among the columns. And then some of the questions that they recommended: what do you see? What do you notice first? How's the text and other information arranged? What details suggest when this was published? What details where this was published? Who do you think was the audience for this publication? What was important at the time and place of publication? And they can begin to use this too for things that they see in social media. What can you tell about the point of view of the people who produce this? And then since they're talking about historical materials, what would be different and what would be the same if it were produced today? And then what do you wonder about in the reflection piece? Who? And then they always encourage you to have the kids consider who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. And then they give you extension ideas. So how you can take this particular activity that you're doing, if you were analyzing newspapers, what you could do with it, how you could go further with it. So again, pretty cool collection. Now, a second source, to me, they're very closely aligned, but the National Archives, it's called NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration. All we care about is the National Archives. And I noticed that their website has actually become www.archives.gov. But they also have a collection of educator resources. And you can see under them that they include civics. They have a category called Docs Teach, and that's similar to what the Library of Congress provides, providing you with lots of online tools for teaching. But if you have a unit that you want to produce and you want to set aside some time to put this together, they have these activity tools that you can use to put your own materials together, which is great. And they also have a number of additional kinds of ways of analyzing documents. So you might, you can look at both the Library of Congress and the National Archives and decide which materials are most appropriate for use for your students. They have virtual visits to the National Archives and virtual programs at all age levels. And I wondered, how young do they actually go? And they have great programs even for kindergartners and first graders. So elementary kids, middle school kids, high school students, they have free PD webinars. If your students or you have colleagues whose students participate in National History Day, they have National History Day webinars. And I noted for the Iowa teachers that the archivists at the Herbert Hoover Presidential Library, but as well as any other presidential libraries, will work with the students on their National History Day projects. And then the last thing that they have a link for is a family history activity set for students. So these are more or less genealogy kinds of activities. But they have a cool thing. This would be another thing that you could start out. If I were a history teacher, I'd probably start with something like this every day. They have a today's document. Now, technically it isn't from today. I like this picture better, and they put this up on September 11th for September 12th. But this was interesting to me, and this again would be something that the kids could analyze the format of this political sort of. Well, it falls in the category of a political cartoon, but it looks almost more like a poster. It's that in August of 1918 for World War I, Congress amended the Selective Service Act to expand the age range of men eligible for the draft. And so you notice that the Statue of Liberty is pointing to September 12th because that was the last day that they could get enrolled and that they were obligated to get enrolled. So it's an interesting imagery, but something new every day. And then for they separate the document analysis even by age. And so this is the little image that they use for their elementary document analysis pages. And they have worksheets for all these different categories. And then, so the novices or younger students have that little eagle on there, and then they divide them up. And they have pages for English learners as well. But these are their pages they're more attractive and more appealing to kids, but these are the basics of the questions. And I did it for poster analysis. So what do you see? Are you seeing more words or pictures? What do the words tell you? Right. And then for elementary kids, write down any words you don't know. Observe the parts of the poster. What are the main colors? What are the symbols and what do they mean? 2 words that describe the poster. So just really great. That's poster. I have an extra S in there. But they have, great activities for the students to do. So if you'll send us your links, we'll add them to our links. And that's my email address on here. And I just want to thank you all for being here with us, and would love to hear from you and the important things that you want to share. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much. And also, if you think of something like this that you'd like to have us repeat this on some different topics, especially if you know the person with the expertise like Stacey had, then let me know that too, because I could envision us doing this every couple of months if it's beneficial to you to actually hear from somebody who's so excited about these resources that they're using and what they do with them. And so stay in touch, and